Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at one of my latest builds, the flying GoPro. Before we get into the good stuff and I tell you guys what this thing is packing for hardware, let me explain a little bit my motivation and my decision behind building this particular quad. If you've been following this channel for a little while now, maybe in the past you've seen some videos chasing motorcycles or monster trucks or other things like that, and that's really the purpose behind building this quad. I wanted to build a small, nimble chase quad that pretty much has all the power and performance of a 5-inch and also has the capability of carrying a GoPro session. And that's literally why I call this the flying GoPro, because the GoPro itself almost weighs more than the quad does. Personally, I think this build came out excellent, and I think it's going to serve its ultimate purpose wonderfully. It's not really fantastic for acro. I have gotten myself into trouble a couple times flying it, kind of thinking that it's going to have the same overall performance as a 5-inch. And even though it's really close, in some situations where you're going to need 100% throttle and maximum power, that's kind of where this guy falls short. Mostly I believe it's just because the tiny propellers can't keep up with the motors. However, knowing that and flying this thing within its limitations, it's just an absolute dream. What do you say? We jump on over to the overhead camera and take a look at some of the hardware. Let's start with one of the more critical parts of the build, and that's the frame and frame selection. This particular frame is an Iflight IX3, and I have to say that I'm a real fan of Iflight frames. I don't think you can beat them with just about anything else on the market, bang for the buck. This is a very affordable, very high quality carbon frame. I mean, look at this thing's only a little tiny 3-inch, and I can't even flex these arms. All the edges are nicely chamfered, which I think is an excellent bonus when you're buying a frame. Personally, I think every frame should be shipped like this now. And for the sake of example, let's compare the carbon here to another $20 frame. It's probably hard to tell the exact differences, but with the naked eye, just by looking at these two different frames, you can easily see the difference in quality of carbon. They both cost the same retail, but again, the Iflight is just far superior. Hey, look at this. We don't even have chamfered edges, and you can just see by the external pattern on the carbon that the weave just simply isn't as tight as the Iflight frame. Now, granted, the outer weave pattern does not indicate the pattern on the inside of the carbon fiber, and it does not indicate strength. However, the overall look and feel of this carbon is very, very similar with very inexpensive frames. So again, both of these frames come in at the $20 price point, except one is far superior. This frame is the version 3.1, and it came with the smaller 2mm standoffs. Personally, I would have liked to have seen this with an M3 standoff instead of the 2mm, and the ones that Iflight included in the kit are relatively cheap and inexpensive. In fact, to add strength to the frame, I did go ahead and replace the front two with knurl standoffs that I had here at the house. Also, while building, another recommendation is I always replace the frame screws with stainless steel. I always put the longest screw I can through the GoPro mount, but all the rest of them are replaced with stainless steel. Sometimes stainless steel can be a little bit more brittle, but I have never had a problem using these quality fasteners, and they are typically much, much stronger than anything that's going to come with the frame. And one other pro tip when it comes to building, always put a washer on your GoPro mount to prevent the foot from being able to pull through the screw. I have experienced that in the past, but the washer is going to allow you to tighten the fastener much tighter, and it's going to hold everything in place much better. If you like this GoPro mount, I do have them available on my Thingiverse for this frame specifically, and also the majority of other Iflight frames that are currently on the market. So check that out if you're looking for this mount. Let's start working our way in. From the outside, we'll take a look at the motors. For this build, I selected the EMAX ES series. These are 1606 motors, 3300 kV. And I actually had a lot of debate when it came on deciding the kV of these motors. I knew I wanted a relatively big motor, so it would have a lot of power. But when it came to the kV, I put a lot of consideration into everything overall, considering performance and battery life. Now, I am running this quad on 4S, and I personally feel that I made an excellent choice going with the 3300 kV. The 4000 kV may have made this quad a little bit unmanageable, at least as far as throttle control is concerned. And with this particular build, accuracy is the name of the game, and it's absolutely critical. So again, that's why I went with the 3300 kV. On the front side, we're featuring the new Falkor Micro 2 camera. I just put a review video up on this camera a couple of days ago, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. And let me just say, this little guy is fantastic. I love its performance. A couple of simple things to make life easier. Anytime I bottom mount a battery, or I have screw heads that have the potential to mar or damage a battery, I like to 3D print a little TPU battery pad. This is just something that I custom designed real quickly. If there is enough of an interest in this, I will post it on Thingiverse so you guys can enjoy it as well. Another small 3D printed part that goes a long way is I made a little sidecar for the capacitor. This build is incredibly tight. I did not know what to do with the capacitor. This is the best I could come up with. I have done this in the past on race quads, and I've never really had an issue with it, so I imagine that this installation is going to be A-OK on here as well. In fact, this build is so tight that you probably can't see it, but I've got my buzzer jammed in the little gap on the bottom of the frame here, in between the camera and the ESCs. I'm sure you can see how tight the stack is in here. I actually had to get quite creative trying to figure out my spacing in order to get everything to fit. As a matter of fact, this is so tight that I had to consider the double-sided tape for my Crossfire receiver sitting on the very top of this stack. I even have tiny nylon washers in here to literally expand my gap by a single millimeter in some cases. But going through the stack, starting at the bottom, this ESC was originally part of the Diatone MAMBA Power Stack V2. I installed this ESC and the flight controller in that Whoopee HD frame that I was building. However, the BEC on the Diatone flight controller did not last very long. I almost immediately burned it out with the LEDs I had on that quad, but I am still using the MAMBA F25 ESC. This is 20 amp continuous, 25 amp burst, and so far so good with these tiny little motors. Well, tiny little motors, they're big for what they are. But so far I've had no issues on 4S, and I've flown, I don't know, somewhere in the ballpark of at least 30 batteries through this guy since I first put it together. So far I'm happy with this ESC. It does have a built-in current sensor, and I can take that analog output, easily hook it up to my flight controller, and get current sensing. That's a feature that I really like, is being able to keep track of my milliamp hours, in addition to seeing the voltage on the OSD. Our next item up is the AIKON F4 Mini 20x20 flight controller. Coming up in a few days, I am going to have a detailed video out on this particular flight controller. And as a matter of fact, if this is something that you're interested in, I'm even going to be able to get you a discount code as well. So I'm not going to get into all the details on this flight controller. Rest assured, within the next few days, I'm going to have a very detailed review out on it. I will just say that this is definitely one of my favorite 20x20 flight controllers. For the VTX, this particular build is featuring the AKK FX3-ultimat Mini 20x20 VTX. What's nice about this particular VTX is, I don't know if you can see way down in there, I've actually got it facing backwards, but way down inside of there, it has a MMCX connector, and it also has a UFL connector for your antenna. So depending on your build, or maybe even what you have available for antennas, you can use either of those two options, no problem. And in this case, for my AKK Micro, I am using the UFL connector that is positioned on the top of the board. Of course, an important feature of this VTX that every single VTX I'm going to be buying moving forward, I'm going to be looking for, is smart audio. This one does support smart audio, and it's worked excellent from day one. And then the absolute last item shoved way in there on the top that you probably can't see is the Crossfire Nano receiver. Pretty standard, just your regular old Crossfire. I love it. Crossfire all the things. This is a great little quad. I am absolutely thrilled at how it came out. Since we've done all the bench stuff, I think there's only one thing left to do, and that's take this thing outside and do a little rippage. So check out this flight footage. I think I'm pretty much done here today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that maybe this video has inspired you to build something awesome and a little bit out of the ordinary, because essentially that's what we do around here. Everything a little bit out of control. Thank you to Banggood for sending me some of the parts that I've used in this build. And of course, as always, thank you to HotDog FPV for the warm, fuzzy hugs all winter long. That's all I got for today. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.